Right. Um, Hello, everyone. Once again, welcome to another week of urban design theory and urban morphology. Um, Thank you all for joining me. It's cloudy here in Surabaya at the moment, but I hope it's lovely where you are at right now. Um, This week, I'll deliver three key discussions: the impact of urban morphology. So, continuing on what we talked about last week, where I presented to you some case studies of how urban morphology affects uh, or uh, can impact the how we experience the built environment. So now I'll give you an idea of how to sort of measure the impact of urban morphology, um, and then I'll touch on a little bit about how to analyze urban morphology, or how you can analyze urban morphology, and then I'll bring up a discussion on the issues that are inherent to urban morphology as a discipline. um, Last week, I gave you some illustrations on how urban morphology can affect business opportunities for some people, and then how it can affect. I think urban heat island was another one, and then air quality was the other, or was it airflow? Um, and such. So those are just illustrations on how we can on how urban morphology has or can impact um, people's daily lives and people's overall comfort and well-being living in the city. But you can actually measure the impact of urban form. Um, you can measure its impact on noise levels, you can measure its impact on air quality, you can measure urban form's impact uh, on ground permeability, I assume, and and all other things. I'll give you an example of how urban morphology impacts air quality and what you should look out for were to measure um, if you were to measure the impact of urban morphology um, on air quality. So um, the shape or the form of a city has a direct and indirect impact on pollution concentration, the overall air quality. It can impact air pollution concentration directly, or it impacts or it affects it indirectly through changes in micrometeorology or the urban microclimate. It has something to do, or it may have something to do with urban heat island and such. But so it can impact it directly or through other means. Um, and in a research on air quality in Hong Kong, I shared the paper with you in the resource folder. Um, this table here demonstrates the variables and the factors that determine air quality as impacted by urban morphology. Now, um, it's easy to think that, oh, okay, the components or the variables that we should look out for, that we should measure, that we should observe from one city to another is similar. Um, Similar, yes, but 100% same, no. Um, so, but some of the more general terms can be applied can be applied generally. So, variables to observe, such as regional factors, city level factors, and then site composition or locality factors. They're applicable everywhere. Topography or the urban terrain, altitude, how high is it of the sea of the of sea level, how high it is from sea level, and how far it is from a water body. However, sub-variable number three, distance from water body, may be irrelevant if the city that we are observing happens to be situated um, in a more mountainous area or very far away from the sea. But a water body can also mean a lake, um, not just the ocean. At the city level, the urban layout, the city size, and the proximity to pollution source. Pollution sources such as landfills, or perhaps even industrial areas, industrial sites, factories, and such. The site composition or locality factors are, I think, this variable and its subvariables are pretty much applicable everywhere. You can observe population density per square kilometer, maybe, and then what sort of land use they use, traffic load. With traffic, the fun thing is with traffic load, you can get real time data from providers such as Google Maps, and of course its location or its situation, which is inherently related to the regional factors. Um, you can use some of these variables. You can use some of these variables to help you observe the city or the locations of your choice for your group assignment in this course. And then other factors such as land coverage or land utilization, how much land or the intensity of land usage, or well, land use intensity, how compact it is. Some of these variables, again, they may vary from one place to another. It really depends on the context you are working with. But this is just to give you an illustration of how, of the things that you should keep an eye out for if you choose to um, if you choose to um, if you choose to try and measure the impact of urban morphology on the built environment, on the environment, or on the living conditions around us. You can modify these variables to suit your need, I suppose. For example, if you're looking into the impact of the form of the urban form on noise levels, for example, then you might change, or you might adjust this subvariable 3 to proximity to noise source, such as, let's say, airfields or factories and such. Um, Regional factors may or may not have an impact on the level of noise, um, but I think urban terrain may have a role in blocking out some noise. I know you can use the topography, the urban topography, or the geographical features in your site, to block off some noise. Um, I don't think you guys have done site planning yet, right? This is where I think topography, terrain, altitude, and whatnot. These regional factors we will explore a little further in site planning. Um, but I don't think you're doing it this semester. Anyways, but that's to give you an illustration of the things that you should look out for. Um, when you want to measure the impact. But these variables are very, very flexible. Again, from one place to another, they are highly varied. So as if I come back to your to your group assignment, I asked you to observe a time series or a time series and time series data, essentially, to sort of illustrate to you how urban morphology can change over time as new urban fabric is added, um, and and as the existing fabric is internally modified. For example, new buildings might be erected to replace old ones, or maybe or maybe several plots of land have been amalgamated, have been um, consolidated or even subdivided to form new lots, maybe bigger lots or smaller lots, and maybe even some street layouts are modified. As for example, for those of you who live in Surabaya and Sidoarjo, over the last decade or decade and a half, you can see the changes. You can see the changes, at least in the urban periphery, especially in the eastern part of Surabaya, with the Middle Eastern Ring Road construction. It wasn't there 10 years ago, but now the ring road is fully connected, or now the ring road is done, and it has successfully connected the northern part and the southern parts of the city. Um, so these internal modifications are of a major concern because they do represent the outward physical manifestation of a range of social, economic, cultural, and political dimensions that are associated with urban dynamics. So when we talk about, oh, there are economic factors or there are political factors and such, well, the construction of a road, the construction of a building, the construction of a facility, and others alike are the physical manifestation of those forces. Um, Now, when you analyze the urban morphology, there are two general approaches. Um, Either you are an internalist or you are an externalist, more or less so. The internalist are people who I wouldn't say believe in the internalist values, but uh, people who people who people who think along the lines of, or people who are in line with the internalist school of thought, um, believe that the urban form is governed by internal sets of relations. So there are factors within an urban area that govern how the urban form looks or develops. Um, some of these interactions are permanent, and then there are rules of transformation over time that dictate changes to the fabric. Um, to be quite honest, I, to be quite honest, I find that the internalist school of thinking is a little bit vague, um, because personally I'm more of the externalist, as in that an urban form is the result of external push and pull factors such as politics, anthropology, geography, history, economy, and even down to an individual's perception on how the city should look like. So um, Personally, I believe that that the urban form is a product of the processes driven by the following determinants. Um, there could be other that these six determinants are the most prevalent of all determinants. But understanding the drivers or the determinants of urban form is not enough, of course, regardless of whether you take the internalist or the external schools of thought. Sorry, um, it wouldn't really make sense um, without having to sort of uh, without having to take a step back and look at the form as a whole. Now, urban morphological changes can be detected using remote sensing. Um, Obviously, this is remote sensing and mapping softwares will be some of the things or some of the tools that you will interact with frequently throughout your academic career at ITS, and even more so once you switch to to a professional career in planning. So it can be detected using remote sensing, especially when land use or land cover transitions from one type or another, or when the intensity of a given land use or material composition changes within a particular area. So um, I think that when you start to think of of a location or of a city's form, then one of the easiest ways to identify how it changes, or one of the easiest way to observe how it changes over time, is to break the city into several basic elements, and then you observe these elements at different points of time to observe the changes. Um, for example, if you were to if you so if you split the map, if you split the urban map into built and unbuilt areas, and then you have a look at how much the built areas have changed, um, have the have the built areas gone even bigger, or have they been reduced over time? I know that there are some cities in the world that are categorized as shrinking cities. I know a lot of them. I know a lot of them. A lot of these shrinking cities dot Europe, especially Germany. I remember one. I remember coming to one city called Arnstadt, where the population is dwindling because all the young people have moved out, and what is left there is just the older generation, and because they're mostly old people, because mostly old people live there. Um, I think their businesses are dying out, and even more people are moving out. So the city actually shrinks its borders to adjust to the dwindling population. And I think the local administration even said that at some point, I'm afraid that we'll have to remove Arnstadt from the map. Um, I don't know if that was them, if that was her being a bit sarcastic about the whole situation, but um, there is a certain degree of fear of actually losing the city because of the dwindling population. So basic elements, you break it down to basic elements, and then you observe these elements over time. Now, in addition to revealing the nature of internal changes in the morphology, it's also possible to identify the magnitude of these changes when you observe the changes to the different components over time. Um, an aggregated magnitude of changes at the census tract level can reveal a very coherent story of the morphology of a city, and not just the morphology, but if you dive even deeper into it, then you can also see how the determinants have played their part in shaping the city. So this next bit is something that I just most it's something that I recently thought about. I believe that there are several issues, there are several problems. If I were to be so blunt, there are several problems in urban morphology, two of which we can address and try to solve through our course. First of all, as a multidisciplinary field of study, there is a tendency for relevant disciplines or relevant fields of knowledge or relevant sciences to be poorly connected. Um, more on that a little later. The second problem I have with urban morphology is that a large part of the urban morphology body of knowledge is built from research about European and North American cities. There are some research emerging from Asia, East Asia especially, but I think quantity-wise, North American and Eurocentric studies are still quite dominant, and I have an issue with that. Um, for the because there's I have an issue with I take an issue with that because there is an imbalance in how different parts of the world contribute to this urban morphology body of knowledge, as I like to call it. Um, for the first issue, we will be exploring the drivers of change affecting urban morphology in the following weeks. I know you have access to a copy of the semester learning plan. Then you will see that from weeks 4 to weeks 7, we will be exploring the drivers of change that affect urban morphology. And so we'll be tackling that first issue very shortly. The second issue with the North American and Eurocentric contribution to the body of knowledge, it may take some time to overcome, but that's why we will try to overcome this problem by observing several Indonesian cities in our course assignment. And hopefully over the next few years, we can contribute to the urban morphology body of knowledge by documenting cities across Indonesia and maybe even expand it to across Asia. Right. So that's my grand plan for this course. Excuse me. Now, as I mentioned, as I mentioned, we will be exploring we will be exploring different determinants and to kick off our effort to overcome the issue of multidisciplinarity in urban morphology. So yeah, over the next few weeks, we will be exploring those determinants, topography, transport, sociocultural factors, and the economy, and maybe other factors that I haven't listed here. So before we do that, I propose that we have a preliminary discussion about how those factors influence urban morphology, and then we'll see if the results of this discussion, or we'll see, sorry, we will see if we if throughout, if we can prove the results of these discussions, if we can justify your findings over the following weeks. For example, after the parallel discussion, you decide that no, topography and transport doesn't have anything to do with urban morphology, for example. Well, let's see if we can prove you wrong, or if you can prove yourself that you're right over the next few weeks. So to do this, I will split the class into two groups. Don't worry about which room you're going to join, because Zoom will randomly assign you to a room. In your group, I'd like you to discuss how each factor influences urban morphology, and think about how the different factors interact with each other. And you'll have about 40 minutes to discuss with your group. I'll jump in from one room to another to see how you're going. You can use Google Jamboard that I provided. Hang on. I have a discussion brief that I posted in Classroom just above the link to this session. However, if you haven't accessed that document, allow me to send it over through the chat box. Just hang on a bit. Just back this discussion. So you can use the Google board provided inside the brief if you'd like to help you with your discussions, or you can use any other means of interactive. You can use any other means to assist you with your discussion. And finally, present your thoughts and findings to the class. You know what? Just to make it easier, I think I'll just okay. The screen should have switched to this discussion brief. So, this exercise attempts to resolve one of the issues inherent to urban morphology, urban morphology discipline, which is multidisciplinarity. I'm asking you to predict how different factors affect urban morphology, and as I mentioned, you can use the Google Jamboards that I've prepared here for room 1 and room 2. Don't click on them just yet, because you can click on them after you've been assigned to a room. You can use other collaborative tools. I know Miro is widely used. You can use Miro instead, and Miro is now built into Zoom anyway, so that's an alternative. The factors to consider are topography and other geographical features, transportation networks, and perhaps even technological advances in transportation and communications, socio-political and cultural factors, of course, and then economics, and perhaps during the discussion you have or you found other factors that you think are relevant to shaping the urban environment. Now, at the end of the discussion, you should have an idea of how different factors affect urban morphology, and your ideas will be challenged as we progress throughout the upcoming weeks. They will be challenged, and or they will be justified. So you can. This is a chance. This is a chance for you guys to say in front of the class that, haha, I told you so, that sort of thing. Now, as I said earlier, the class will be divided into random groups. This has nothing to do with the grouping list that you sent me earlier in the semester. This is a separate activity from the group assignment. So you'll be assigned you'll be divided into two random groups: the parallel discussions, or the internal discussions within the groups will take place for about 40 minutes, and consider these two questions. What factors should you be researching? I think I assigned room one to topography and transport, room two to socio-cultural, political factors and the economy. But if you decide that topography and transport is not enough, you want to have a look at other factors as well, you may do so. So it's a flexible arrangement. Um, do a quick research on how the factors influence urban morphology. Consider how one or more factors may interact with one another, and influence urban morphology as one singular issue, or maybe they negate one another, however it goes. And then once the 40 minutes are up, present your ideas to the class, more or less 10 minutes per group. And then afterwards, we'll have a panel discussion. You can support, you can criticize, you can provide feedback on your peers' thoughts and ideas. So whether you agree with them, whether you disagree with them, or maybe you can even argue that you have a different perspective. It's all um, it's all yeah. Give it a go at the panel discussion. So one of the reasons why I think the main reason why I am assigning you this activity is that it it is to hone your ability to browse, collate, and arrange information in a relatively short period of time, because I think that's an essential skill that often gets overlooked at times. So before I assign you to your rooms, does anybody have any questions regarding this, regarding the um, regarding the activity? Yes, Hannah.
Yes, thank you, sir, for the opportunity. I would like to ask regarding the presentation. Does the presentation must all of the members of the group, or one representative is enough in presenting the ideas?
Okay, good one. You you can assign a group representative to speak for the whole group, or if one of the members of the group happen to have a an idea that or maybe during the presentation, another member of your group would like to add to the information. They can always speak up. This is more of a town hall discussion setting where everybody has a voice. It doesn't always have to be through that one person that speaks for the rest of you. You can just yeah. It's up to you, really. It's up to you. I'm not going to be too rigid on the terms in this discussion. Okay, so I've created two breakout rooms. Room one, room two. Okay, good. I'm going to open all the rooms now. All right, I'm just here to make sure everyone's clear on the task. I haven't joined. I'm going to join the other room shortly because I think there are a couple of people who haven't joined the rooms, but everyone's clear on the task so far. All right, great. I see a couple of heads nodding. I will leave you guys to it, and I'll switch to the other room.
Not how much that impacts the urban morphology. Okay, maybe we could start on discussing on what are the factors that you guys think is affecting or influencing the urban morphology. Anyone has an opinion? Or maybe you guys have searched it before. I have actually, but I'm not sure.
Okay, welcome back. Welcome back to the main room, everyone. I hope I've given you ample time to discuss, and I don't know. Let's see. Who would like to go first and present the results of their discussion? And someone just left. Room 1 or room 2? Anyone? It doesn't have to be a proper. It doesn't have to be a proper PowerPoint presentation. It can be just. It can be just your board or your notes and whatnot. Would anyone like to start, or do I have to point? Do I have to choose for you? How about we start from room 2 then? Yeah, I've enabled screen sharing. Should you need to share your screen, whenever you're ready, the time and screen, the time and platform is yours.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chantika from room 2, and I'm going to explain regarding the social factor 1. So the social interaction is one of the major design elements in the urban planning, and apart from providing a living space for the inhabitants, housing should be over spaces for public life to incubate. The ideal one, housing have like the interconnected neighborhoods, compactness, mix of use, and also the housing diversity regarding to the social interactions. For ease understandable word, I'm going to take the example in a city. I'm sorry, but I couldn't pronounce it. I think it's like La Duchere. So the preferred buildings in that area is the long and high buildings. In addition to the high density, this building have an economic benefit to constructions. However, after several years, they finally realized that there is a heterogeneous. So there is one community that is being advantaged and also one community that being disadvantaged because of this. Therefore, there's the thing called the decay of social system. It was then realized that the buildings, through their morphology, eliminated the relationship with the street. It means that the urban morphology doesn't suitable for that social matters, and it needs to be updated or being renewal. Therefore, they have a physical renewable from the observations of the common objective emerge. And the goal is to recreate a new theme of social relation by physically transforming the neighborhood. And that's for that example, it is why understanding the habitat in its social context is essential to ensure the sustainable development of the future urban spaces for the social matters. Maybe next regarding the cultural factors.
Okay, and as for the cultural, there are some points that we agree on the room. So the first one is we agree that the quality of urban environment are shaped by the culture. So it goes the same with how the quality of a city are shaped by the culture, and it can be improved based on what we found in the room previously, that city is as the considered spaces. And also the second point is sustainable cities need integrated policy making that builds on culture. So the role of cultural heritage with regard to urban resilience must be concerned with natural, economic, and social hazards, which are connected to another of our topics that we talk about. And for the example, it will be shown in the second slide, but before that, I think I will go with the political and economic first.
Okay, so I'm going to explain about the political aspects. So when it comes to political aspects, government policy has a very important influential, it's very influential to the change of urban form. Like for instance, if the government set a different price and demand for real estate as the distance from the central business district or CBD increases, this will cause land users such as industry, residential, and retail will compete with one another for land close to the city center, because as we know that the city center has good communication links, allowing certain industry to gain maximum profits. And this is also known as the bid rent theory. Another example is is happening in Al Anbar province in Iraq. So its urban morphology changed due to violation. So violation itself affects city morphology in three ways. First, concentration of people have a feature in defending themselves from attackers. Second, the emergence of cities as targets of violence makes people disperse. Finally, frequently violence targeted the transportation system, which increases the effective cost of transportation, which usually increases the demand for density.
So for economic aspect, new services like gymnasiums, shops, and cafe restaurant were also accommodated. The project now invites enterprise to establish their businesses in the sector. Office buildings are built next to the living place. This makes economic development happen.
So this is the other point about the cultural aspect that we talk about. So we think that strengthening the intercultural dialogue and community participation in urban recognition is important stuff. And also we agree that we found a book. I forgot to put up the link, but it says that culture is crystallized in architectural and landscape heritage and enhanced by the urban experience. The daily ritual of a city, both prosaic and spiritual. And we agree with that. And also, we also totally agree that the fact that a city is only lasting if memories are manifested, maintained, renewed, and also continually revived, without which the historical and remote narrative values evoke. So as we can see, here's the picture that show the Ottoman period gives cities their architectural form, and the architectural and urbanizing innovation of the empire therefore had a lasting influence on the morphology of the cities. The Madinah were confirmed as the influential capitals of this vast territory.
I think that's it from room 2. Okay, thank you for your attention.
Wow, thank you very much. That was a lot better than I had expected. Well done. Well done. Before we move on to discussions, I'd like to give the opportunity to the people from room 1 to share their thoughts first. So you're more than welcome to begin your session.
Is my voice heardable?
Yep.
All right, thank you for checking it up with me. Let's start the presentation for group 1. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. This is the presentation regarding the room 1, what we have discussed regarding transportation and topography, and does this affect many or little to our urban morphology? Now, before we start, I would like to give Arin the chance to explain to us what is topography.
So first, urban morphology needs the urban site, the land, and topography is the land physical feature. Topography is the study of the Earth's surface and all its lumps and bumps. It looks like the contour of the land and the vegetation covering the surface and man-made features. So the example will be mountain, hills, forest, river, and ocean. And the shape of the city morphology will affect the pattern of the city's transportation network. And the pattern of transportation network is a series of transportation in the form of intersection with transportation roads. The morphology of the city is the element of land use, road patterns, and building types.
All right, after we hear about what is topography, let's now discuss about what is transportation. As we know, transportation is something that carries us or things to one place to another. As we know, here we have provided the examples like cars, aircraft, ships, bus, trains, and many more transportation systems like bikes and anything that you can think of. Now, those type of transportation would lead us to creating like infrastructure to provide those type of transportation for us to access. Those type of infrastructures could be like bus stops, train station, airport, train road, port, parking ways, highways, and many more of that. And this transportation will emerge as an urban form. Now, what is after we know what is topography, we know what is transportation, let's see what is the example what topography interacts with the morphology of the city. Now, here we could see that we provided like an example where the development in the flat areas will be different on those in the hill areas. Like for example, that has the land like it's quite in the slope, and that what makes the buildings that is in those areas to be different. Like how the urban area or how those area will be developed will be different in any parts of ways. So we cannot, this is something that we might think as if the topology is cannot be added or decreased, like we can't make the hill as the same hate as one another. Therefore, we're going to change on how we want to morph or change the city, how we want to design the city. And that's regarding the example of what topography interact the morphology of the city. Next, I'm going to give to Bima on explaining on how the factors interact.
Yeah, before we go into how topography and transportation interact, I would like to explain the example of what transportation interact to the morphology of the city. The first one, based on history, the development of transportation is very influential on the urban morphology, starting from the time when people were still walking, then using animals, then the time when they were cars, and then built freeways. And then layout of street is an indicator of urban morphology. There are two layout of streets. The first one is irregular system, which is can be seen in Jakarta, Indonesia, and Bangkok, Thailand. And maybe you can, Arin, you can zoom to the picture. Yeah, that's the example of irregular system in Jakarta, Indonesia. And the next one, the next layout of streets is concentric radial, which is can be seen in Paris, France. And as you can see in this picture, the morphology is quite different. It's more neat, it's more structured than the irregular one in Jakarta. And next, I'm going to explain the interaction between the transportation and the typology. The first one, I mean the topography. The first one, topography affecting the transportation system. For example, when the land is crossed by river, then bridge is needed. And the second one, when creating roads, we need enough and steady land to build on. If we don't, then we'll have to change the characteristic of the land. I think that's all from us. Thank you for your attention.
Excellent. Well done. It's actually quite amazing, the amount of information that we can gather over a relatively short period of time. As a reminder, I just mentioned in the chat as well. Please do not clear your boards, as we will come back to these as we progress through the coming weeks. Right. So now we can start the discussion session. I'd like to kick it off by highlighting a few things. First of all, I like what the second group. Let's just say group 1, group 2, from room 1 and room 2. So I like what group 2 said about quality urban spaces, and how quality urban environments are shaped by culture. I remember listening, sitting in a guest lecture session about urban design, and I forgot his name, but the speaker at that time said that quality urban spaces, or quality urban design, to be specific, really hangs on the cultural aspect of things, and how the urban designer or urban planner takes into account and accommodates the local culture. So yes, in a way, the culture, the local culture shapes the environment, and then in turn, as time goes, then the environment also shapes the culture. With transportation and topography in Group 1, I suppose one of the highlights of how transportation, especially the advances, or the technological advances in transportation, impact the urban morphology. In the first session, I mentioned how transport speeds and how the speed of distribution of goods affects the city size. A horse, a city that is moved by horses and horse carts would probably or typically would typically have about a 3 kilometer or a 5 kilometer radius, whereas nowadays with technological advances in transportation that allow the covering of much greater distances in a short amount of time, that contributes to urban expansion, of course, and thus not only the urban size but also the way the city is formed because of the way the city interacts with its context or topography. Well, again, thank you very much to the two groups that have presented. It's a very interesting discussion that you very interesting points of discussion that you have brought up. Do you agree with what the other group has said? Or do you agree with the idea of the other group? And or maybe from a social, cultural, political, and economic standpoint, how would transportation affect the social, cultural aspects and in turn affect the urban morphology? Do you think? I'll give you an example. So with the advances of transportation technology, it allows or pushes the expansion of cities. However, despite those advances, um, we do feel an economic pressure because of when we move from one place to another. For example, if we live in the urban periphery, but we study, work, and conduct our main activities in the city center, that is, say, 20 kilometers away, then that sure we can cover 20 kilometers in an ideal world we can cover 20 kilometers in half an hour, but um, but to cover 20 kilometers in half an hour, that puts an economic strain on ourselves because we have to consider fuel consumption, and we have to consider also maintenance, and not to mention if we count the political factors as well, not to mention the vehicle and road tax that we have to pay. And then some of you might even consider insuring, applying for insuring your vehicles. So that's how technological advances impact urban expansion and urban morphology, but in turn also impacts us economically. So what other aspects or what other ways do you think these many different factors can interact with one another to impact the urban form, and in turn maybe in fact impact us as well? Anyone? I've just realized something. In Group One's board, you mentioned the decay of social system. It was then realized that the buildings, through their morphology, eliminated the relationship with the street. It has something to do with the building facade, of course, and in general, but you'll explore this further as you go to the urban design side of things. But in general, there are two types of building facades. There are passive ones and there are active ones. I think you can guess which one is. I guess you can sort of guess which one is which. The passive ones are the type of building facade that are not very inviting. Usually they're either closed off or they have a very they don't really have a transparent they don't have a transparent facade. The active facade are the are the type of building faces that are inviting. Let's think of a street side restaurant or a street side cafe where you walk by and then you can see what's going on inside, and that's the kind of facade that is known as an active facade. But in in its history and its development, Jalan Tunjungan in Surabaya used to be full of places and shops with active facades. But as time goes by, these active facades then turn inwards and become very, very passive facades. The shop owners remodeled their facades in a way that cuts off the interaction between the interior of the building and the streets. It continued to be like that until the early 2000s. But nowadays, I think the Tunjungan corridor from Siola to Hotel Mojopahit, their facades have changed. There's a tendency to return. To the good old times where building facades were active and a lot more inviting compared to say 2 decades ago, or 3 decades ago. Sorry. So that's an interesting point. Decay of social system, and it would be nice. It would be awesome to see how that plays into the changes in urban morphology. Physical renewal. Anybody else would like to add to that? Usually Nadine or Hannah has something to say. Well, maybe not at this time, maybe not at this moment. But this is a very good starting point to the following weeks to the following weeks to come. Once again, please don't wipe out your boards. Because we will be coming back to that. We will be coming back to that over the next couple of weeks. But all in all, I've just been called. I've just been called to another meeting, so I need to wrap this up pretty quickly. So, all in all, thank you very much. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and ideas with the class today. It turned out it turned out very well, and I hope that, and I do look forward to doing the sort of to doing more of this sort of activities with you guys in the future. Um, yes, hang on, I'm coming. So thank you again for joining me this afternoon in Urban Morphology. I look forward to seeing you. I look forward to seeing everyone again next week. Stay safe, stay well, everyone, and have a great afternoon. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.